Hello, welcome to my channel, The Hebrew Bible. This is Moses Gumadi, and in this video today we'll talk about Purim. Today is the 15th of the month of Adar in the Jewish reckoning, and today is the second day of final day of Purim. And so in this video we'll talk about the festival of Purim mentioned in the book of Esther, and also about the fact that God, although not mentioned in the book of Esther, he is hidden within it. And I'm going to show a code that is hidden within the book of Esther as well. So let's begin with Esther chapter 9, verse 20 and 21. We read here, Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly. So this is where the feast of Purim has been established, on the 14th day of the month of Adar, also on the 15th day. Here we read, Et Yom Arba'a Asar LaChodesh Adar. That's the month of Adar. Okay, Ve'et Yom Hamisha Asar Bo. That's the 15th day of the same. Bechol Shana Veshana. Every year it says. And they have been doing it every year. Great. Now, what is this month of Adar? Month of Adar is obviously the 12th month. These are the 12 months of the Jewish calendar, which is a lunisolar calendar, starting with Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Amar Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shevat, and Adar. Now, all of these months, of course, are not mentioned in the Bible. Some of the names come from Babylon. However, some months are actually, in fact, mentioned in the Bible. Kislev, for example, the 9th month, and the month of Adar, of course, is mentioned in the book of Esther. Kislev is mentioned in the book of Nehemiah. Also, there are 4 more months, number 1, 2, and 7 and 8 are mentioned also in the Bible with different names. So we have Aviv and Ziv instead of Nisan and Iyar. So Aviv and Ziv. And Ethanim and Bul. Ethanim and Bul instead of Tishrei and Cheshvan. Okay, so this is what we've got. These 4 months plus these 2 months, 6 months out of the 12 are mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, some of the names that are relevant with the feast of Purim in the book of Esther. I just want to familiarize them with you, those of you who are learning Hebrew in this channel. So we're talking about Ahasuerus. That's how it is pronounced in the Hebrew. It is translated as Xerxes in most English Bibles. In the King James Bible, it is translated as Ahasuerus, but it is pronounced in Hebrew as Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus. Okay. Now, his queen, of course, this guy was the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, king of the Persian Empire, which had taken over Babylon, and also obviously the Jews' kingdom at that time as well. The Jews, had been sent back by Cyrus back to Jerusalem to build the temple. However, not all Jews had come, and we know that many had stayed back, and during that time Ahasuerus was king in Persia. His queen here was Vashti. Here are the letters Vav, Shin, Tav, and Yod. Vashti means beautiful. Okay, and another character in the book of Esther is Mordecai. Mordecai. Mor. Why are we saying Mor, not Mar? Because this is Kamatz Katan, or Khatuf, Kamatz Katuf, or something they say. Kamatz Katan, when there is no stress on this, and when the next letter has a shva, is a closed syllable, you say Mor, not Mar. It's like Chokhma, not Chachma. Similarly, we say Mordechai. basically means a Mardukite. So who belongs to Marduk? Marduk was a Babylonian deity. So why is this guy a Jewish guy? Of course Mordecai is Jewish. Why is he having this name? They were trying to hide their identity and embrace the Gentile identity. That's what they're doing there, as many Jews do even today. So crypto Jews, you can say, they're Jews, proper Jews, of course, but they have taken a different name here, Mardukite, which is Mordechai. Now Esther, of course, means star in the Persian language, Esther. Now I will give you an alternative meaning, not of Esther, but slightly a different word with a different same letters but different vowels. We'll talk about that regarding the hidden name of God in the book of Esther. I'll come to that. Okay, also Haman is another character. This guy is the villain. He is the chief anti-Semite. Okay, he's the guy who you can say is the Hitler's granddaddy. And he is the inspiration to Hitler. He wanted to kill all the Jews just because Mordecai did not bow before him. It's ridiculous. And he wanted to get rid of all the Jews throughout all the 120 provinces of the empire, and he somehow managed to talk the king into agreeing to that and got the letters printed and all that stuff. We'll talk about that. However, his name means magnificent. It's ridiculous. Haman. Shushan is the place all this drama has taken place. Shushan is a winter palace of the Persian kings. And the word, of course, means lily in Hebrew. Shoshanim are lilies. Shushan is also lily. And Susan is the word in English, the name many women have, girls have. Susan or Shoshana, they're all the same. Okay, lily. Purim is the name of the festival. It means lots. It comes from the word pur, which is the Persian word. Pur means a lot, and Purim are the lots. So they cast the lots to decide the date. That's the 13th of Adar was the date that was decided to kill all the Jews on that particular day. They cast lots and decided a lucky day, as it were. Okay, so this is the summary of what happened in the book of Esther. Basically, it begins with Ahasuerus, the king, making a big party for all his satraps and his princes and ministers, etc. And they have eaten and they are drunk. And now Ahasuerus orders his queen Vashti to come, as it were, for a fashion show, for a ramp walk, let's say. And she refused. And so he got annoyed. And other people also said, well, if the queen is not listening to the word of the king, then no other women would listen to the words of their men. And so let's remove her. So they removed her. And so they suggested that let's put up a beauty contest, right, to select a new queen. And so they made an elaborate contest and, got some girls in and they decorated them. They treated them with all the stuff, whatever. And finally, Esther becomes the queen. Esther was a Jewess. She was the niece of Mordecai. But they hide their identity because they know it could be dangerous. So she has a sort of Persian-sounding name. And she hides her identity. She becomes the queen. Now, later on, what happens is that Mordecai discovers an assassination plot made by a couple of guys, assassination of Ahasuerus, of the king. So Mordecai goes and tells the queen, Esther, now, and she passes that information on to the king Ahasuerus, and so he gets them killed. Those guys are gone, and Ahasuerus forgets about it, but this matter is recorded in their annals. Now, a bit later, one of the ministers of Ahasuerus, the king, who was Haman, he was exalted to be the prime minister, number 2 in the kingdom. Later on, when he was going, like when he goes in and comes out, everybody like bends and bows to him. But Mordecai was there right at the gate. He never bows to him. So he gets annoyed with Mordecai, and he decides, fine, what happened? And they tell him that, you know what, this guy doesn't bend or bow because he's a Jew. And so he gets mad. So Haman decides, I'm going to kill all the Jews. So he goes to the king and somehow convinces him to get a decree passed to kill all the Jews. And so they basically cast a lot and decides the month. And they cast a lot to decide the date. And they decide on the 13th of the month of Adar to kill all the Jews in all the 120 provinces of the Persian Empire. One of the provinces, interestingly, is also mentioned as India. That would be the northwestern frontier of India, probably part of Afghanistan and some portion of Pakistan. Okay, now, when this was known, Mordecai, of course, requests Esther to appeal to the king, but she says, well, I can't go to the king without being invited, otherwise I could get killed. And he says, well, you may have been brought to this position for this very purpose. Who knows? If you refuse to do the right thing today, God can bring salvation from some other source. And so she agrees, and she fasts 3 days. She tells Mordecai and all the Jews to fast for 3 days. And then she goes to the king to request his presence. And she goes and invites the king and Haman for a feast. And so, meanwhile, what happens is after that feast, so Haman goes to the feast, but that night the king doesn't get sleep. And he asks some of his staff to read the annals, the chronicles of the kingdom, and they read the chronicles of the kingdom. And it so happens that they glance this particular incident where Mordecai discovered the assassination plot, and that was read to the king on that night. And he says, hey, have we rewarded this guy at all because of what he has done? And they say, no, we got to honor him. And then immediately in the next second, Haman, actually having thought of killing Mordecai, he already decides to hang Mordecai, and he actually prepares gallows from Mordecai before that. And he comes to the king to get his permission to get Mordecai killed. And at that time, king, having read the chronicles of the kingdom and realized that Mordecai had saved him from assassination, he asks Haman, hey, what should be done in order to honor somebody whom the king really wants to honor? And Haman thinks, oh, who else king would honor other than me? And so he says, oh, this and that must be done for somebody whom the king honors. And so he says, well, okay, fine, go and do that to Mordecai. And so Haman's face was down, and so he somehow has to do it. He goes and honors Mordecai the next day and puts him on the horse and, makes a procession or whatever. All that is done. And he comes back to the feast on the second day because Esther invites both of them again on the second day. And on the second day, Esther reveals to the king. Then he asks her, what is your petition? He says, look, I'm a part of a people who have been sentenced to death. He says, who sentenced you to death? Then she says, Haman. Well, king gets enraged and a few other things happen. And then eventually he orders Haman to be hanged. And he was hung, Haman, on the very gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. However, although Haman is hanged, the decree that was passed, which cannot be reversed according to the Persian law, had already gone. So the 13th of Adar, slaughter of the Jews is going to happen because of the decree. And so what are we going to do? Oh, by the way, Haman was hanged, and whole of Haman's estate was given to Esther, and Mordecai takes the position of Haman as the prime minister. King elevates him to that position. And so King Mordecai and Esther together decide to ask the king to issue another decree, a counter decree, not to counter the previous one, but basically a decree issued to let the Jews to defend themselves, right? So by then, once this decree is issued, so you have two decrees, two counter decrees. One decree for others to kill the Jews, another decree for the Jews to defend themselves. And a Jew now is in number 2 position, and a Jewess is the queen. And so everybody is afraid, and so they are afraid to execute what they thought. But some fellows anyway wanted to do it, and therefore the Jews, defended themselves. All the 10 sons of Haman and all the enemies of the Jews who tried to kill them were killed by the Jews on the 13th, and the 14th of Adar. Okay, because of which the feast of Purim was declared on the 14th and 15th of Adar. So the whole race of Jews was saved from destruction and from genocide by Haman. That's the story. Now, Esther, of course, was Hadassah. That was her original name, which she changed to Esther. Hadassah means myrtle. Myrtle tree is like these are some pictures of myrtle trees, if you would like to know what it is. And Esther, of course, means star. But I'll tell you something very interesting. There is a word in the scripture where Esater, same letters, Aleph, Samech, Tav, and Resh. If you take out the vowels, and in fact, in the original, before the Tiberian vowels were put, there were no vowels. So, you could read Esther as Esater, that means I shall be hid, or indeed, and in fact, this particular very word, with this very vowel points occurs in Genesis 4:14, where Cain says, from thy face shall I be hid. He says, Me'al paneha adama mipanecha esater. I will be hid from thy face. And that word occurs very much. But if you slightly change this into Yiktol, first person, Yiktol, Estor, this is Ektol form, first person, singular, Yiktol, of the root Samech, Tav, and Resh, Seter. If you take that and make it Estor, means I will hide. Interestingly, it sounds very similar to Esther, but not quite though. It means I will hide. Perhaps God has a message in that, because you see, the whole of the story is coincidence after coincidence, where God, delivers the nation from being slaughtered. And the word God, or the 4-letter tetragrammaton, the divine name YHWH, doesn't appear at all in the book of Esther. Neither Elohim, nor El, nor Adonai, YHWH, they appear in the book of Esther. No mention. Yet, we see the divine name is hidden in the code in 4 places in the book of Esther, which I'm going to mention. I'll come back to this screen once again. Let's begin with the references. So these are the references: 120, 5:4, 5:13, 7:7. So Esther 1:20. Here we read, these are the 4 turning positions where Vashti, before Vashti was cast out, the king's decree was published throughout, because all the wives shall give to their husbands honor. Why this decree is published? Because Vashti did not give honor to the king. That's how they understood it, and therefore they got rid of her, which is why Esther came. Otherwise, the whole book of Esther story wouldn't have happened. And right at that location, we read this. This is the phrase that is highlighted. You have YHWH in the first letters of the phrase in the reverse order. And I'll tell you the 2 in the reverse order and 2 in the forward order. I'm going to talk about that shortly. But just be aware that in Esther 1:20, the name of the Lord YHWH is quoted here. Now, the next occurrence is in Esther 5:4, where Esther goes to the king and asks if the king and Haman could come to her feast, to her banquet on that day. She says, Yavo hamelech vehaman hayom. So today, the king and Haman, please, they may come. Let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet. Of course, unto the banquet is next coming here. Here we read this phrase, and in the phrase, the first letters, so Yod, He, Vav, He. First letters of each word on these 4 words is Yod, He, Vav, He, the name of God. Next location is in Esther chapter 5 verse 13 in the same chapter. Again, what I try to mention is this again is a turning point. Esther goes to the king to request him to come to that feast. In fact, if the king was not pleased, she was not called, so yet she goes. She could have been killed, possibility. But nevertheless, so this is a turning point. And the next one is again a turning point, because here is Haman after the first day of the feast. He goes back to his house. He sees Mordecai not bowing, and he tells his wife, look, all this honor that the king is giving me is really nothing until Mordecai bows. And since he's not bowing, what should I do? And so they suggest to him, they tell him, hey, get rid of him. Just there is a gallows, make a gallows and hang him, right? That's what they said. And here Mordecai is speaking, Haman is speaking. Yet all this availeth me nothing. V'chol ze einenu shaveli. Shove li. So this is all vain or nothing to me. Here again, Yod, He, Vav, He in the reverse. In the reverse. The first one was reverse, second one was forward, the third one is reverse, and the fourth one will be forward, we will see. Okay, the fourth one in Esther 7:7. Here we read that the king arising from the banquet of the wine in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. So the game is over. The king realized he was angry with Haman now. So this is again a major turning point. It says, for he saw that there was evil determined against him, against Haman, by the king. Ki chalta elav hara. Evil was determined against him. Yod, He, Vav, He. The name of God hidden here in the book of Esther. So that is the summary of all these 4 occurrences. Yod, He, Vav, He in the reverse in the first occurrence, forward in the second occurrence. Both number 1 and 2 are the first letters. Number 3 and 4 are the last letters. Yod, He, Vav, He in the reverse, the last letters of the words. And here, Yod, He, Vav, He in the forward, last letters of the word. 2 of them last letters, 2 of them first letters, 2 of them forward, 2 of them reverse. So I have indicated here, you may want to pause and see. Another interesting thing is, whenever it is in the reverse, it is the Gentile who is speaking. Here the courtier, so the king speaks. Here Haman speaks in the reverse. Whereas when it is forward, Yod, He, Vav, He is forward, Esther speaks here. And here Mordecai, because Mordecai is assumed to have written the book of Esther. Even if it is not Mordecai, say Ezra wrote it or whoever wrote it. It's a Jew who wrote it. And so this statement was a commentary. Here we read, for he saw that there was evil determined against him. This is a description. This is a commentary. It's not words of somebody. And therefore, this must have been written by the writer of the book of Esther, who is a Jew. And so whenever a Jew speaks, the name of God here is in the first letter, in the forward direction, Yod, He, Vav, He. And the Gentile speaks, the name of God is in the reverse direction. An interesting pattern. Again, first letters in the first 2 and the last letters in the last 2. Here is the thing. In Isaiah 45 verse 15 we read, Verily thou art a God that hidest thyself, O God of Israel, the Savior. It may not be apparent to us. The name of God might not have been mentioned in that book. But the providence of God is very clear. Behind the scenes, He is working and ensuring that His program is going on. That is how the Lord is working. He is God both in the heavens and on the earth. His kingdom ruleth over all, is what we read in the book of Psalms. And therefore, God works behind the scenes, and He sometimes appears as though He hides Himself. Esther is a verb, means I will hide. Esther, of course, means a star in the Persian language. But note, if you take off all the vowel points, the letters are the same. Aleph, Samech, Tav, Resh. That's what it is. Thank you for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe to my channel and make your comments. And I will see you again in the next video as soon as I can. Thank you very much.